There are so many of us committed to improving the lives of the youth in our communities. The In It for Youth podcast is a place for us to come together, from professionals who work with and serve youth to those that champion issues affecting children, to community advocates and stakeholders, and insightful young minds too. The In It for Youth podcast is a tapestry of voices united by a dedication to youth well-being and empowering the young generations of today and tomorrow. I'm your host, Jamie Gale, and I'm so glad you've joined me on this team that is in it for youth. Hello and welcome back to the show, and welcome to season 2 of the In It for Youth podcast. I'm really excited about this next batch of episodes you're going to be hearing this season. I think you're really going to enjoy them and learn from my guests and consider ways to impact the youth in your lives, which I know is really at the heart of everything our listening community members care about. I'm excited to bring you more conversations with my colleagues who are true experts in their fields and are each in it for youth in their own ways. Today's conversation is with one of those amazing colleagues. My guest today is Tara Charlotte, who is the owner and director of Yummy Sprout, a company that makes a huge impact through teaching kids about healthy recipes and how to cook them. Yummy Sprout will be celebrating 15 years soon, and in that time has grown into a business that includes culinary classes, camps, events, parties, field trips, and more. Tara has her Bachelor of Arts degree and over 20 years of experience working with children. She has been featured in the Wisconsin State Journal, on Whisk TV, Madison Mom's Blog, Wisconsin Public Radio, and NBC 15 on topics including homemade baby food, cooking with kids, packing healthy lunches, and allergy-friendly food. She is also co-founder and co-director of Creative Soul Camp, which is the collaboration that she and I work together on. Congratulations on all of your impact on youth well-being, Tara, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to chat. There's a million things that we could record a podcast on together. Our lives overlap and our work overlaps in a lot of ways, but today we're going to focus on your company, Yummy Sprout. So I'd love to start with how Yummy Sprout began and what the main goals are, and then we can kind of chat about what that has looked like over the years. But just kind of starting with how did it start? Why did you start it? Where did it start? All of that.
Yeah, I would say that I've always loved to cook my whole life. I learned a lot from my grandmothers and kind of always wanted to cook, but didn't necessarily see it as a career. And I also, like you said, have a lot of experience working with kids, teaching preschool. I really wanted to find a way to combine all the things that I love and also make a difference. And when my oldest daughter was really young, I was looking for something I could do part-time so I could still stay home with her. And I just had this idea that maybe I could try teaching a cooking class. And I started actually teaching baby food making classes to adults, and they were really popular. From there, it grew into teaching classes to kids. And from there, I kind of really knew within the first short period of time teaching those classes to kids, okay, this is what I was really meant to do. And I could see what a huge impact it was making. These tiny little moments would make such a huge impact in a kid's life. And so the other reason I think is as my, daughter started to get a little bit older, and then I had my second daughter, this was kind of what I wanted to see in the world. I know we talk about this idea a lot that we've created things that were I wish this existed. And so I wanted there to be cooking classes for my kids, specifically ones that taught how to cook everything and that worked with, a lot of different foods, healthy foods. And it just seemed like everything was just decorating a cookie. And a lot of that was the steps were taken out of it. And it was just that final thing, which is great and fun. But I was just looking for something a little more.
So when you started your company, this was sort of before, I knew of your company, but we didn't know each other then. So I actually don't know that much about the beginning stages of it. So could you just kind of tell us a little bit about when you said baby food, what did people come to you to learn?
Well, this is, quite a long time ago. And it was sort of popular. There was a few different baby food making cookbooks. There was a few blogs out there at this time. And so people were interested in it, I think, either because they liked the idea of being able to control what was in the baby food, and also that it could save money, which you definitely could save a lot of money doing that because you would make it in bulk. The cost per serving was probably half or even less the price of buying it in the store. So I think that was a big pull for people. I was kind of making it already. And I had friends that were like, oh my gosh, how did you do this? Oh, you're just so amazing. And I was like, I'm really not. Like, this is insanely easy. You need like 3 tools and some fruit or vegetables, So they were like, you should teach a class on it. And so I said, okay. And I just called around to some different grocery stores and I found a store that had a classroom and was like, sure, yeah, you can come and teach your classes here. And we'd actually taught our classes there for years. And then we went to another store. Then we went into schools and really being a mobile program so that we could bring programs to different places.
Awesome. Okay. That's really interesting. That was right around the time when I'm thinking back to then. I wish that I had known about this then. Because it was like the parent chat rooms were like so busy with like what should you be putting in your kids' food, and so I wish that I'd known because I was like making it up as I went, and I wish I had somebody that knew more about it. So that's great. Okay, so Yummy Sprout. It started with the baby food classes. If you live in Madison, you know about Yummy Sprout. But if you don't live in Madison or you don't have kids this age, what has Yummy Sprout looked like over the years? I know now we focus on our work at Creative Soul together, but what does a cooking class with kids look like? Where has this journey taken you over the past 15 years?
Wow. Well, it's been a big journey. I mean, I think one of the things, and I'm sure that a lot of business owners tell you this too, but you kind of have to be willing to go with the flow and ride the roller coaster because it's not always going to look exactly like you think it's going to look. It was growing kind of slowly at first. And part of that was I was putting in the time that I had. I had 2 small kids. And part of that time too, I went back and I had a corporate job part-time. So, there was a lot of things going on. And in the beginning, I only taught a few classes a month. And then by 2020, I had other staff as well. And we were teaching classes every single week. We had classes every weekend. We were booked out for parties for months in advance. We had, the programs in some private schools, whether it was like during a preschool day or after school, we had some different programs going. And then when 2020 happened, obviously one of the first things to go is like anything that's extracurricular. And then you talk about, let's get in a room full of kids that touch everything with food and all that. And it was just, I knew instantly, I was like, we're going to have to put a pause on this right now. And we did, but luckily I kind of quickly switched over to doing virtual classes and they were surprisingly popular. I think people, especially during lockdown, really needed something for their kids to do. So we did that. And obviously, we were able to do some virtual camps as well. And I even did some virtual birthday parties. And then since then, it's just been slowly kind of growing back into where it makes the most sense, where we fit. We focused a lot on private programs versus public programming. So being in, a private school or doing camps and things like that. I'm not going to say we'll never do any public programming again. I really hope we do. It's just something that I think we have to get back to, and we're not quite there yet.
And similarly, with my kids yoga company, when the business has grown so much and you're contracted by somewhere that's already assembling the kids, the passion is there for the public classes, but sometimes it just doesn't make the business sense to, take registrations one by one when you have a contract for a semester or whatever it is. So yeah.
Yeah. And the public programming isn't super lucrative. You have to work, 10 times as hard to make less. And then to be able to staff that, you have to be able to pay the staff. So it's more of a challenge. Right. I just love being able to offer that programming. And so that's why I really hope we can bring it back at some point.
Right. Well, my kids and I took your virtual classes during COVID, and this is even after years and years of knowing you and working with you, but it was still such a delight. And it really reminded me, my kids when they were younger took your classes, your public classes. And I remember, just to give the listeners a peek into it, like one of their very favorite recipes, and this will kind of transition into our next topic here, was that they made a heartbeat hummus. And I don't think my kids had ever eaten hummus, but somehow you could help them do all the steps to make this like natural pink hummus that they were so proud of, that had beets in it. And, I don't even know what else was in it, but they were, they were so proud, and they came home and ate it. And that was such a surprise. And I think that really represents what you do that's so special with Yummy Sprout, is that you really get kids to make and taste and create things that they normally would, turn their nose up at, or they wouldn't normally go for, they wouldn't normally try. And so I think that that's something that's really unique about the way you approach cooking with kids, is that not only is it healthy, but it expands their minds and expands their skills. And so I'd love to take the conversation into a direction where we kind of talk about, what do people who don't know Yummy Sprout think that cooking with kids or teaching a kids cooking class or even cooking at home looks like? And then how do you see as the best approach and your counterpoint and how you approach these things? So yeah, I guess, is there like a first thing that comes to mind of like what people think kids cooking is or cooking with kids is, and how you approach it?
Well, I definitely think when people think cooking with kids, definitely if I tell them that piece of what I do, I don't think that they have a clear picture of what that necessarily is. I definitely think parents probably think, oh my gosh, that's probably chaotic and crazy. And not to say it can't be, but, and obviously as a parent, I know there's nights where you're like, oh gosh, I could ask them to help. I could get them in here, but the mess is going to be tenfold. I'm tired. I just need to feed these children. And so like, it's not always practical, but I do think that people have this idea in their mind that it has to be this big thing. We have to have a recipe planned. We're going to make these cookies together. We're going to do this. And then they kind of maybe have this idea in their mind. And when it doesn't work out that way, they're kind of like, well, we're not going to do that again. And my advice is just, have your kids in the kitchen helping you all the time with the tiniest things. If it's 5 minutes, you're making a salad and you're like, hey guys, come in here. And you put the dressing in a squeeze bottle and have them shake it, or you have them toss it. Yeah, probably some salad's going to go on the counter. But then when it's dinner time, you can be like, oh yeah, you made the salad. And it's this sense of pride. And I think that really helps them be more willing to try the food, or at least see it as a really positive thing that later in life they may try it. I mean, getting your kids to try new foods, experience new foods, it's not an instant thing. It's a lifelong process. So giving them these positive experiences will really help them. And yeah, getting them really comfortable in the kitchen where it's just not a big deal for them to come in and help for a few minutes. And then it's not as much mess and it's not as much pressure on parents to kind of clean it all up and make it, this big special thing. And I'm not saying that you can't have those big special things, but I do think just little tiny pieces, get them in the kitchen helping every day with everything is huge.
So, and you touched on something that was like, oh, what if they're not going to eat it? And so I think that, well, one, I think, yes, for parents that are putting in the work and after a busy work day, all of that, like that might be a deterrent for making something. But in your classes, I do notice that that's something that parents will say in the camp that we share together. We'll just say like, oh, well, I don't know if my kid's going to eat that or they're not going to eat that. What do you hear about that on a regular basis? And then how do you handle those questions, or how do you approach it in class, or what do you see actually happen in your classes?
I think that's one of the huge things that's kept me really motivated to keep going with the business over the years, is how much positive feedback we've gotten from people about their kids trying things in the classes that they would have never tried at home, which there's probably a lot of reasons for that. Number one is you have this positive peer pressure. They're observing other kids try it. They're curious. The other thing is we have a very important policy. All of our staff know it, is that we don't ever force the kids in our classes to try anything ever. And you'll have those kids that will come in and their first question is, do I have to eat what I make? And we're like, nope. But I always try to encourage them to make it. Sometimes it's really hard for them to understand, especially younger kids, this idea of I'm going to make something for someone else that I'm not eating. But once they kind of grasp that concept and they take that pressure off themselves, they're so much more likely to actually try things in the future. And so, I mean, I think that's really important. And I can understand as a parent, that's hard. Obviously, if you've bought all the food, you've spent time making it, you're trying to feed your kids healthy food and they won't even try it. That is so frustrating. So I always tell kids, if they say like, at home, I have to try it, I'll say, oh, that makes sense. But in culinary class, this is the time where you can learn to make something. And if you try it, great. And if you taste it and you don't like it, you don't have to finish it. In culinary class, that's fine. So kind of giving them that experience and that lower pressure situation, I think can really help.
Yeah, it's really cool to see that the kids, well, one, get to experience this freedom of not feeling the need to try it. Cause it's almost like you see kids, they don't want to even open the door to being even willing to like touch it or make it. Cause they think, oh, that then they're going to be pressured to eat it, but they really aren't in your classes. And that's something like across the board, you've had your team really been very clear on, which is very cool. But then, yeah, they will go home and eat it. And we'll get an email like from a parent saying, oh, my kid ate this recipe, this homemade, whatever, guacamole or whatever it was, and that they would never eat at home. And can we have that exact recipe? And One of the other things that I hear people talk to you about is like, oh, that the tools are dangerous, or, that the kids aren't going to know how to use something. And I think that's something that you really focus on with your team, is that even if they're not going to eat what they make, they're learning the skills. So yeah, what are some of the skills that let's say somebody were to take 10 classes with you, like what are the types of skills that you think are really important for, let's say, school age kids to learn to help their sort of future experiences with cooking?
Well, I think you touched on one. My first rule is safety first. So I always try to talk about that. I do think that that can be scary. I know when my girls were little too, it's like I was already teaching these cooking classes. And then when I would bring them into the kitchen, I would kind of be on high alert because it's like, okay, you've got the stove and it's hot. You've got this and that. And so but the truth is they have to learn. And so finding a way to remind them and keeping things safe, that we don't touch hot things or sharp things. I wouldn't say bring your kids in and give them a giant butcher knife at 3, but there's a lot of things they can do. They can stir with a spoon. In our classes, we use kid chef knives that are sharp enough to cut, but designed so that they won't, slip and cut themselves or anything like that. And just really helping them learn to be safe themselves and learn those skills as they sort of grow in the kitchen.
Another thing you kind of touched on earlier was you said people think of, like just decorating a cookie. And so I think that to really understand Yummy Sprout, you have to really know that you guys focus so much on a very specific approach to the types of ingredients that you use, the types of recipes you make. So what are a couple types of recipes that you think people would raise an eyebrow and be surprised that you can have kids make?
Absolutely. And just to say too, there's nothing wrong with decorating cookies. I love it. But again, we do try to do something that's more unique or something they may not have had a chance to do before. One example is something that we make a lot that transcends to a lot of different recipes. And it's really great for practicing knife skills, which is really important for kids to learn, just how to cut things safely, how to cut them in different sizes. And so that is salsa. We make salsa a lot. We recently made a cranberry salsa and the kids were really kind of like, wait, how are we going to cut these cranberries? And you use fresh cranberries. And so once they started cutting them, then they realized oh, you can cut these pretty easily. And so mixing up a salsa, adding in, some kind of an acid, whether it's lime juice or something, and salt, letting it sit for just a few minutes, and it completely transforms the taste of it. So I think that's one of my favorite recipes because the kids will be so surprised to be like, wait, we just made this thing that we normally buy in a jar with just these ingredients and it tastes so good. That's usually a really popular one. And I do really love that when we can make a recipe that the kids are used to seeing just come out of a jar or a bottle and they didn't know you could make it. Once we made some dumplings and then we made homemade sweet and sour sauce and the kids were just like, I didn't know you could make sweet and sour sauce. They were so confused that we mixed things together and it tasted just like what they were used to. So I think that's one of my favorite things is being able to take, just fairly basic ingredients and mix them and create something that they may not have tried before.
It is really spectacular to watch the kids expand their minds. And even if they're not taste it right away, just to learn about the different interactions and different options. And they usually, like you said, they usually do end up tasting it. So that's really cool.
Or they'll take it to their parents, when they get picked up and they're so proud of it. And that's a really valuable skill to learn too. And a great feeling of hey, that's a positive experience that they've now had with this food, even if they didn't try it.
And it takes, just like with anything with, anybody, and kids and adults, but especially kids, it takes so many exposures for them to feel comfortable with something. So it's just, another tally in there, another rep for it. The other thing I think is really cool that I'd love for you to share a little bit about is how you make your classes so inclusive for people that have dietary restrictions. My own kids have had restrictions over the years. I have a nephew with severe allergies, and so there's very little cooking opportunities or food related opportunities that he can participate in, but he has taken your camps. And so I just would love to kind of hear about sort of how you approach that and then why you do it the way you do.
Yeah, that's something that's really important to me too. I personally have celiac disease, so I was diagnosed 12 years ago. So I have been gluten-free since then. Over the years, you do meet a lot of kids with food allergies, food restrictions, or intolerances. And I really just wanted a program that everybody would be able to participate in. So even before I had my own food allergy challenges, I was really doing a lot of research and focusing on how to make sure I could make things safe for kids that wanted to be in the program. And some parents will be like, oh, we understand they probably can't do the cooking class. We can just send everything. And I'll be like, well, here's what I'm going to use. Here's the way that we do it. We are not using any of these products. And usually they're comfortable and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, we'd love to have them participate, So, I mean, it can be challenging, especially like at summer camp or something when you maybe have a group with a lot of allergies. And so you're trying to accommodate all of those allergies. So not each individual kid has, 10 allergies, but when you combine the whole group together. So we just try to balance that. Obviously, if it's a severe nut allergy or something, anaphylactic allergy, we're not going to use any of that product at all during that week. And then if it's, a dairy intolerance or a gluten intolerance or something, we're going to make sure, each student is making their own and they're going to have the safe ingredients as well as making sure there's no cross-contamination and they have all their own tools and containers to use. So that's just an approach that we've sort of done from the beginning. So we're pretty comfortable with it.
It's definitely an above and beyond thing because one, it's a huge extra expense and coordination. You have to start with the allergies and then pick the recipes and then look at the ingredients and all of that. And also it's really a cool thing because these kids who usually can't participate in the birthday treats, who can't participate in the classroom food related things, or they can only do it halfway, or they can stir but they can't eat, or whatever it is, that they just get to experience relaxing into the activity. As an outsider to your programming in that way, I see them creating this beautiful connection with cooking that normally is something that's probably has a lot of fear around it, especially if they have a severe allergy. And it's a different type of inclusion that you don't necessarily think of when you think about kids programming, but it makes a huge difference. And it's really important for the kids who don't have allergies too, to see these accommodations being made and for everybody to adapt so that everybody can be included in it. So I just wanted to give you a kudos on that because it's a really beautiful part of your programming.
Oh, thank you. We do try to put a positive spin on it too. I can imagine, obviously I didn't know about things when I was a kid, but I can imagine that it might be embarrassing sometimes. I'm even sometimes embarrassed when I go to a restaurant and I have to ask questions or whatever. So wanting to just let everybody know, it's not a big deal. We're going to make it safe for everybody so everybody can participate. And yeah, it's really neat to be able to see those kids have an experience they may not have been able to have. But you're right about the cost. Allergy-friendly food is very expensive.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it'll keep coming the other direction.
Oh, that would be nice. Yeah.
All right. I'd love to just kind of talk through the different ages. And if somebody is listening, let's say they're a classroom teacher and they'd like to incorporate some more work with food into their classroom, or you have a parent or caregiver who's like, okay, I know I should be more open to letting the kids help me in the kitchen. Could we just kind of talk through maybe the main age groups about what are some skills or ideas for ways that adults could include kids of that age into food prep or cooking, or maybe even some food that you would encourage people to expose their kids to at the different ages? If we could start with the toddler preschool age. So what are some skills that kids at that age can build? What are ways that you could include them in the kitchen, and maybe a food that you would encourage them to try with their toddler or preschooler?
Yeah, I think a huge one for toddlers and preschoolers is stirring, so mixing. And you can have them mix things that you've already mixed that don't really need to be mixed. As long as it's not something that you could overmix, they will have so much pride and joy in it. As well as, I don't think it's too young to start with some knife skills. You can get a kid chef knife. You can have them cutting something that you've maybe already pre-cut and they're just kind of moving the knife down and chopping it a little bit more. Something that's great is making a fruit salad with them where you literally just mix fruit together. Toddlers and preschoolers tend to sometimes be still a little bit cautious about things that are mixed like that with different textures. So they might be more apt to eat their fruit separately. So having them sort of work on a recipe with you where they're getting to help cut and they're mixing and then they're going to maybe eat it. And if they're not wanting to eat it with a spoon, they could pick out the fruit that they then like. So just getting an experience, I think, where you're starting with maybe foods that you would already give them like fruit, but maybe try a new fruit or having them help cut and mix them together would be a great thing.
Love it. Okay. How about elementary school age kids?
Oh my gosh, there's so much you could do with elementary school kids. I think one of the best, this is a really good tip. If you want to give them something new, if you want to have them try something new, if you want to have them get to make a recipe on their own, the answer is tortilla. So get a tortilla, have them cut it in strips. You can put anything inside it, have them roll it up and make whatever you want to have them try rolls. One of our most popular recipes is pizzadilla rolls, which are basically pizza and a quesadilla in one. And they sort of put pizza ingredients inside these tortilla strips, roll them up. We toast them a little bit. The cheese kind of then melts and holds it together. I think that's probably one of our most popular recipes. And it's so incredibly simple. So grab a tortilla, have them put some stuff in it, roll it up, and they can cut the strips themselves. They can do almost everything in that type of a recipe.
Love it. All right. And then once we get into that sort of middle school tween age, we have a camp directly for this age. And so they get to make some really cool things. What would you recommend for this age?
I would say appeal to their personal taste, have them help you look for recipes. That's something they can do. Appeal to a lot of kids in that age are very concerned with the aesthetic and maybe what's Instagram worthy. So have them be like, ooh, how should we plate this? Especially if they are into like watching cooking shows or really into cooking. Usually when we get kids in that age group, they really like cooking. So they're into this sort of like chef culture and like what's going on. And so they're excited about doing that. Another fun thing that we sometimes do with this age group is what we call mystery basket challenge. So, we'll give them 4 different ingredients, not too crazy, and then be like, what do you want to make with it? And have them sort of create their own recipe.
Yeah. Awesome. Very, very cool. Those are some great tips. And I also think, you do a really nice job. Your teachers do a really nice job of incorporating more of the vocabulary as they get older too. And so that with those tween or upper school age, you really do a nice job of like teaching them the words behind it, teaching them the ideas, like explaining a little bit of the science behind it, like you were talking about the cranberries. And so I think that's another way that your team does a really nice job of growing things up, but also making them safe and accessible for the kids. So nice job. I'm a fan, obviously.
Thank you.
All right. So now I want to just switch a little bit and talk about Yummy Sprout as a company. A company doesn't make it 15 years or 5 years or even 2 years if, in addition to being excellent at the service you provide, you're not also a great business owner behind the scenes, being really excellent at that back end of the business. And so I'm just curious, we have a lot of listeners who are either aspiring to work with youth in some ways or have a passion for you working with kids, but aren't sure if they can turn it into something that's career focused. Like, do you have any tips for anyone who is thinking, I'd really like to actually start a business or make some money doing this, that they care a lot about youth, but they're not exactly sure how to make that something that's a business? So just any tips that you would have for somebody listening?
Well, I would say one thing that it unfortunately took me a long time to learn was that it's okay to accept help and ask for help and hire people to help you. So like I do have a lot of business skills just from my degree in business and other jobs and experiences that I've had as well and working in the corporate world, but I'm not great at everything. And so being able to say, okay, this is the thing that I could be better at. Can I ask somebody to mentor me or help me? Or can I just hire somebody to do this piece of it? And that can be really scary in the beginning. I know you can relate to this too. In the beginning, you're like, that costs 5 cents. No, I can't do that. You're pinching every penny because your business is really, if you're lucky, breaking even. I know they always say that expression of you got to spend money to make money. And I don't know that I would go that far, but I would say that there's times if you can find a way to say like, I think this will be worth it. This will really help me. And whether it's maybe a software, there's some great softwares out there, doing research, asking people, joining a group of other business owners is a huge one too. So you can find out what other people are doing. But yeah, I think that's my biggest tip is like, you don't have to be good at everything to have your own business. You really don't. Be passionate about what you want to do and then find other people that can help you grow it and make it a successful business.
I love it. That was great. All right. At the end of each episode, I always ask my guests the same question. If you could wave a magic wand on behalf of kids in, 2025 now, we're here, what would you wish for them and what messages would you tell them?
Wow, that's, I think there's a lot of wishes. So I'm going to just focus on one because I can't have them all. But I guess I would say I would wish for kids everywhere to have more access to healthy food and more access to learning how to make it and to realize, that that's an option and it tastes good and it's something that they can do.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and for being in it for youth. Please tell listeners where they can reach out to you, where they can find out more about Yummy Sprout and about the other work that you're doing. And we'll put everything in the show notes.
You can find us on social media at Yummy Sprout, as well as you can go to our website, which is just yummysprout.com, and I can be emailed at hello@yummysprout.com.
We will link everything in the show notes. Tara, it was great to chat with you all about Yummy Sprout. We're so busy running our after-school programs and summer camps that sometimes we don't take the time to kind of dig into this topic. So it was fun to have the time to chat with you, and I know our listeners will love it. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And to all the listeners, thanks for listening. We'll be back next time with another inspiring conversation. In It for Youth is a Lit Path Studios production. Music is by Inspiring Audio and Pond 5. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And to learn more about this show and all other shows on the network, visit www.litpathstudios.com.